Sveiki 15 min žiūrovai ir skaitytojai. Šiandien yra Ukrainos nepriklausomybės diena. Ir lygiai 6 mėnesiai nuo to laiko, kai Rusija įsiveržė į Ukrainą ir užpuolė šią kaimyninę šalį. Apie Ukrainos nepriklausomybės dieną ir susijusias aktualijas kalbame su Ukrainos ambasadoriumi Lietuvoje, Petro Bešta. Hello, ambassador.
Labą dieną.
So let's start where we are now. Ukraine's Independence Day will not be usual this year. And the day this year marks 6 months since Russia invaded Ukraine. I thought it's a terrible coincidence, but what do you think? Is it coincidence that Russia selected 24th to invade Ukraine?
I'm sure it doesn't have any relation to the Independence Day of Ukraine, but this year is special. Independence is a key value for every Ukrainian, and this year we have to fight for it as we fought for independence for centuries before against the same Russian Empire. But I would like to start with the idea of statehood of Ukrainians. Statehood has more than 1,000 years, and the first big state, Kievskaya Rus, was a very strong player in Europe. So that was a statehood, very strong, very potential, a lot of people were in it. But then when Russia established its state, then we see the history of fight for independence, and it continues till today, and this is another time when Ukrainian has to mobilize and to win this freedom and independence of our state.
You say Ukraine has to win
Absolutely.
its freedom, and do you expect to celebrate independence from the war that Russia started next year?
Next year it will be absolutely different celebration. The war will be over. This is our hope and plan, and we are sure that next year independence will be dedicated to the new Ukraine, to the future, to the positive thinking, to creativity, and to our unity.
Could you say that Ukraine has the same independence as it was in 1991?
We have come a very long way. This is 31 years ago. This was the collapse of Soviet Empire, and a lot of peoples, including Lithuanians and Ukrainians, we have got another chance to build an independent state, and we did it, and we walked a long way. But unfortunately, after 31 years, after this independence proclamation, we have another empire, Russian Empire, which in fact is in essence the same empire that was trying to destroy us for centuries. This is the end of this Soviet story, because after the collapse of Soviet Union, Ukrainian people, they saw our future differently from Putin and from his regime, and as we see now from a lot of Russian people which don't respect our independence, and they believe that there is a one big people, Russian people, Soviet people. So Ukraine has cut short this discussion decades ago. There is no Soviet people. We have made a lot of reforms in Ukraine. We have built our resilience. We have built our independence. And in fact, this war is the sign of the final cut with this any illusions of Soviet and Russian style people which still believe in those myths. So there is no Soviet people, no one big Russian people, including Ukrainian people.
I see what future you describe for future Ukraine, and if you could elaborate how independent Ukraine will look in 5 years.
In 5 years, okay. Well, in a year, as I said, we will win this war. We will be full of businesses of reconstructing Ukraine, but it will not be just another reconstruction. It will be three things in one. It will be reconstruction, it will be reforms, European style reforms, European Union reforms, everything that we need to do to become a members of the European Union. And it will also be about new senses, about reopening the new potential of Ukrainian nation, because it's deeply connected, the future with the history, with the presence. So after this war, Ukrainian people will finally get rid of any feelings, complexes and fears related to Russian Empire, and we believe that at last we will be able just to build a strong state based on our potential, to open it, to implement it, and to become a very strong European state.
As Lithuanians, we cherish our independence in many different ways. For some people, it is a chance to travel abroad freely. For some, it's democracy or Lithuanian language. And what independence means to you or for Ukrainian nation, if you could speak more broadly?
Independence is a deeply ingrained thing in our character. If you look at the history of the Cossack state, it was a very special statehood of Cossacks, and they produced one of the first European democratic constitutions. So Ukrainians cannot live in occupation, under occupation of another empire, and Russian Empire has to stop, and we will not let it to govern Ukrainians anymore. So this independence, it's about freedom, it's about our natural character, and it's about the possibility to fulfill our potential, and it is really great.
And what about 1991, August 24th? How do you remember that day or that time, particular time?
I was in the school. I studied in Lviv. I then entered the university, and I remember there was a very turbulent and dynamic time for Ukrainians, for younger generation, for students. They established with the older people, with people like Chernovil and others. Ruch, it's a movement of opposition to communist regime, and in fact they were closely cooperating with Lithuanian Sąjūdis those years in 80s, in the beginning of 90s. So they had a established and developed movement. A lot of Ukrainians were supporting it, and 91 was the final point where we could realize our yearn for independence. So this movement was widely supported, including by younger people, including by pupils in school. So we all knew what is happening, and 91% of Ukrainians on the referendum, they voted for independent Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel fear at that time? Because it was, you couldn't know what will happen next day.
I was living in Lviv, in Western Ukraine. So in Western Ukraine, the whole Soviet thing, communist, was, people were very skeptical about it, and it was rather easy for them to not support it, to oppose it, to organize, to mobilize themselves. So the Western Ukraine was always a stronghold of this independence feeling. So everyone, starting from pupils, when students, with young people, with older people, they were united for independence.
And there will be no parade in Ukraine this year, as usual. Instead, Ukraine's military is lining the route with the burned out husks of Russian military equipment. What message does it send to people?
All military equipment is on the front. All soldiers are on the front. We are at these months, at these weeks, which are critical for the next development of war. Everything is on the front. Everything has to build this victory. So no celebrations, including because it is a huge risk for people, because Russians, they probably will use this time for provocations, and we do not need to gather a lot of people at the same place. So celebrations will be next year, that's for sure.
Thank you for your time, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Kalbėjome su Ukrainos ambasadoriumi Lietuvoje, Petro Bešta. Tiek šioje laidoje. Ačiū, kad žiūrėjote. Iki.